NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play.
What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bringing your latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. All right, basketball season is officially underway, and well, depending on when you see this episode, the Nets have either already played their first game or it's right about before the Nets are going to play their first game. When I'm filming this episode, it's currently October 22nd. But by the time that I post it and most people see it, it's going to probably be October 23rd, if not later. But the reality is, I wanted to do this episode a couple days ago, but I'm going to be very honest. NetsBoy has been under the weather lately. Like for like last 4 days, really, NetsBoy's been pretty sick. COVID negative, that part was good, but I might have had the flu, to be honest. I don't know. I didn't go to the doctor or anything, but perhaps I should have. But, I thought I'd get over it and took kind of 4 days to get over. But I'm feeling much better. But I just wanted to state that as the reason why NetsBoy did not post that episode with a little bit more reasonable lead time going into the first game because I honestly couldn't have. But also, if I also randomly start coughing in this episode, because I still have a lingering cough, you know why. So anyway, I digress. Point is, this is the expectations and predictions episode that I do before the season for every year. Every year since I've been doing NetsBoy, I've always done these expectations and predictions regarding the Brooklyn Nets. And I'm going to be honest, I'm wrong almost every year. And I'm also pretty sure I make that statement every year that I'm wrong every year. And I don't know. I might have a slightly different approach this time. I think instead of trying to be like really out there, I think I'm going to really try to focus on honestly things I think could actually happen. But the reality is, with this upcoming season for the Nets, there's a lot of unknown. There is a lot of uncertainty and just a lot of possibilities of what could happen with this team. And I I honestly don't know. So I guess I should just approach this kind of one step at a time. Let's just start off with, I guess, the ultimate objective for this Nets team. And I think it's pretty obvious. And that is just to simply suck. It's the tank. It's to develop the young players, develop the Cam Thomases, the Jalen Wilsons, the Noah Clowneys, right? Maybe Dariq Whitehead, maybe some of these other players like Zaire Williams, who's looked amazing. Develop these young players. But obviously, it's to suck. It's to lose. It's to be one of the worst teams in the NBA. We know that's the objective for this team. All right? That is what the goal should be. And I touched upon this briefly in my last NetsBoy episode. I don't think this Nets team sucks enough on paper. Now, they're entering the season with loads of injuries. We know Daron Sharp is not going to be ready for the opening day. Trendon Walford's not going to be ready. Boyan Bogdanovic is going to miss significant time. Claxton is a game time decision for the first game. So there's a lot of pieces missing to start off the season, which is okay and understandable. But my whole thing is, when this team does come back whole, I just don't see them as a bottom 5 team in the league. And I just am very nervous about that. And obviously, only in this situation can anyone actually be upset that their team is not one of the worst teams in basketball. But if you're going to tank, you got to try to make sure you're a bottom 5 team easily. And that's not to say this next team can't finish bottom 5 with the way the roster currently is. Absolutely, that's possible. I'm just saying, if I'm going to lose, I'm going to make sure I'm losing. Like, if I'm going to suck for the sake of having a better odds to get a franchise-altering draft pick, then I got to make sure I don't screw this up. So, right off the bat, that's the goal. And one of the things I think this means is who is actually going to be on this team come after the trade deadline, right? Like, because you know that someone on this Nets team is going to be traded. At least one, if not two, of these veterans on this team will not be on this team, this Nets team, by the trade deadline. And there's a number of candidates that could possibly be traded. The ones that make the most sense, obviously, are players like Boy Bogdanovic. However, he's going to miss a good chunk of time. So, at what point does he play and get some credibility where the Nets could trade him? But he makes loads of sense. Dorian Finney-Smith, I think he's almost definitely going to get traded. Those are the two that I think are certain have the most likely odds to get traded. Boyan Bogdanovic and Dorian Finney-Smith. It's just a lot of teams want Finney-Smith, a lot of contending teams. He's got a very team-friendly contract. Boyan Bogdanovic is someone that, if he's healthy, can be an effective piece for a championship team. I think those two guys will not be on this team come the trade deadline. I think they will be gone. And honestly, I'm okay with that. If the Nets can take those two players and flip them into lottery protected first round picks, so two lottery protected first round picks for those two players, I would be okay with that. So right off the bat, that's something that needs to be looked at with this team. But in addition, I mean, there's still Dennis Schroeder, who is on an expiring contract. Cam Johnson, who is not an expiring contract, but a pretty team-friendly contract when you look at the grand scheme of things of what players are currently making, and a player with a skill set that a lot of teams might want. He could possibly be traded. Then you've got the mystery man, Ben Simmons, who we're going to touch upon him in a second, but didn't look too bad in the brief stint of games he played, the brief time he played in the preseason. He's an expiring contract. And if he can stay relatively healthy and play the way he's looked in the two preseason games he played, or the few minutes that he played, maybe he could develop enough trade value that Nets could possibly trade him. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities surrounding some of these veterans. But at the end of the day, I do think Bogdanovic and Finney-Smith will be the two most likely candidates to be traded. And if not traded, maybe even waived. I mean, Bogdanovic, I think if the trade deadline comes and Boyan Bogdanovic is on this team, I think the Nets will probably release him and just, waive him, because he doesn't fit any true mold of what this team is looking for. I mean, I touched upon in the last episode, I don't think he should be on this team. I think right now, if he was playing, he'd be getting in the way of playing time for a player like Jalen Wilson, who needs a lot of minutes to continue to develop his skill. Same thing with Noah Clowney. So I'm not sure what the plan is, but Bogdanovic will probably not be on this team, and neither will Dorian Finney-Smith. Now, let's talk a little bit about Ben Simmons again. Like I just mentioned him briefly, but because, I talked about how Boyan Bogdanovic might end up getting waived before the end of the year. I actually think Ben Simmons will too. And here's what I'm thinking is going to happen with Ben Simmons. I think Ben Simmons is going to be relatively healthy this year. I actually believe that. Maybe that's going to be my NetsBoy bold prediction, because, I always have to have some kind of bold prediction. I think he's going to play close to 50 games this year. And yes, I'm saying close to 50 games as if that's somehow a lot of games. But for Ben Simmons, it is. Like, I think 50 games is what he's going to play. I think he's going to be rested all the time on back-to-backs. I think he's going to have some sort of nagging injuries that are going to pop up. But I don't think he's going to have that shut down for the rest of the year injury that he seems to have every year. I think he's going to play around 50 games, which is still barely more than half the season. But that's what I'm thinking. And from what we've seen from him, I think he's going to be pretty solid. This all-star Ben crap, again, it's not going to happen. But I do think that he has the potential to be a very effective player for this Nets team, and a really key player. I think he can average 10 points a game, 8 assists, 8 rebounds. I really think that he's capable of that. And I think that's kind of the numbers I'm going to kind of be expecting from Ben Simmons. But that being said, I don't know if he'll be able to be traded by the trade deadline. I think if Ben Simmons is playing well or playing the way I just said, I think he's going to have value, but I don't think any team's going to be willing to try to take on that contract. I know it's an expiring contract, but it's still like a $40 million contract. So that's a really hard, contract to move in any circumstances. Even though it might be expiring, it's hard. So I actually think what's going to happen is Ben Simmons is going to play decently, play in about 50 games, and get to a point where the Nets are going to either have to keep him for the rest of the year, in which this team will probably not be a playoff team, so kind of be silly, or just simply release him and say, you know what, Ben, no need to have you on this team anymore. You've proven your worth. Good luck to you. We're going to cut you, and you can sign with any other team on a veteran minimum contract or whatever they're willing to give you. Like, I think that's what's actually going to happen. Ideally, I would love the Nets to trade him if he plays well. But I will say this: by some miracle, if he does become All-Star Ben again, which I don't even know why I'm saying this, but if he does, there is a possibility this Nets team could be competing for one of the play-in spots. And that is absolutely a possibility. And then once again, that goes back to what I was talking about the Nets screwing up, sucking, but it's absolutely a possibility. So if Ben Simmons is playing that well, the Nets have to trade him. They have to get him off this team. So the point is, I don't think Ben Simmons is going to be on this team at all either after the trade deadline. I know I mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith and Bojan Bogdanovic as the two most likely people to get traded. Ben Simmons is right there as well. But I just wanted to talk to him in a slightly separate category because, he's been the useless Simmons. But I don't think he's going to be on this team either. Because, like I said, either one of two things are going to really happen. He's either going to play well but not well enough, so the Nets are just going to cut him because no team will trade for him. Or he's going to be hurt again all year, and then after the trade deadline, the Nets are going to cut him. That's the way I look at it. Or the third option is the best. He plays well enough that the Nets can trade him and they can get some kind of small piece back. So there are three possibilities. But in no way do I see Ben Simmons finishing the year as a Brooklyn Net. It just doesn't make sense because it just doesn't. Those other circumstances just make all the sense in the world. So Ben Simmons is someone else I don't think will stay on the Nets beyond the trade deadline. It just, like I said, doesn't make sense. But it will be interesting to see how he plays and if he actually can stay healthy. So now I'm going to quickly just go over some of the things that I saw in the preseason for the few games that I saw. I think they played 4 preseason games, 3 were televised. I did manage to catch those 3 that were, and I know the Nets went 1-3. Their only win came against the Wizards, which is a team that, honestly, I want to say the Nets should definitely be better than, even if they get rid of some of their veterans. But there were just some takeaways that I noticed. The first takeaway is that I really like Coach Fernandez. I really like Jordy. I like his attitude. I like his coaching style. I like what I'm seeing from his players. I feel like I'm getting the same vibes I got when Kenny Atkinson was the head coach. And we all know that the Nets should have never fired Kenny Atkinson in the first place. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole because then this episode would be another 20 minutes. But anyway, I'm getting those type of vibes, though. I'm getting the vibes of players playing hard and wanting to do well. And I will say this, I've liked what I've seen from the offense. And I liked what I've seen from Cam Thomas. Like we all know that NetsBoy and Cam Thomas don't get along, but I've liked what I've seen from him. He's showing a level of maturity. He seems to be playing more in the flow of the offense. And that still doesn't mean he's not going to continue to do his Cam against team mentality that he likes to do when he goes 1-on-5 and starts jacking up a dumb shot. But it looked like he was more willing to play in the flow of things. And I think a lot of that had to do with Ben Simmons being out there at times and Dennis Schroeder being out there and controlling everything. But the ball movement just looked really sharp at times for this Nets team. I also noticed, though, that this Nets team is going to live and die by the three. I mean, I don't remember which game it was. It might have been the Raptors game where the Nets, I think it was the Raptors game, where like their first like 12 shots were all 3-pointers. And it's just like, whoa. Like, is that really going to be the strategy? But I think so. And honestly, everyone on this Nets team, except for really Ben Simmons, I think it's going to have the green light to shoot threes. Even Nick Claxton, I think, is going to get opportunities to shoot threes if he's left open enough. So I think it's just going to be just an all hands on deck, shoot a bunch of threes by this Nets team. And I think that's not a bad strategy. But I've liked the flow of the offense. I've liked what we've seen from Cam Thomas. And I liked what I saw from Cam Johnson. I think Cam Johnson has an opportunity to really put up some pretty impressive numbers this year if he can stay healthy. He's another person like Ben Simmons who just can never stay healthy. But if Cam Johnson can stay healthy, I think he's capable of putting up close to 20 points a game and shooting about 44% from the field and 41% from three. I really think so because his stroke looks sharp. And I think, especially with Bogdanovich being out to start the season, he is the second scorer on the team. Like you look at the roster, like it's Cam Thomas and then clearly Cam Johnson. So I actually think Cam Johnson is going to have a career year offensively if he stays healthy. And I think that's going to be very beneficial for the Nets. And I think that's one of the reasons why we didn't see the Nets trade Cam Johnson, even though there were definitely some offers for him, because I think Sean Marks is banking on him putting up some good numbers and putting up some good statistics and trying to trade him later on and get more for him. So I understand that. So I think the Cams are going to look sharp. I like the offense. I like what I see from Jordy Fernandez as a coach. I like the toughness. Um, I will say though that I am a little nervous about the point guard depth on this Nets team. Talking about the flow of the offense, when Ben Simmons and Dennis Schroeder were not playing, when one of them were not out there, when they were both resting, the offense looked a little stale. And I think it was Shake Milton who was the de facto point guard, or Keon Johnson was the de facto point guard. Like, I don't know if those two guys can be the point guards. Like they're not traditional point guards. Like Schroeder and Ben Simmons, they can control the flow of the offense. But Shake Milton and Keon Johnson, they're not true point guards. So I am a little nervous about the point guard depth for this Nets team, especially with Ben Simmons being one of the point guards. There's no way he's going to be healthy all year. So I am nervous about that. And I am curious to see if Sean Marks down the road will sign a player or make a trade and get another point guard, or is he really going to go with Shake Milton and Keon Johnson as the third string point guards? I mean, we know that Trendon Wofford can actually kind of do it too. You know, he's going to miss some time, as I touched upon earlier. But we saw last year at times him being like a de facto point forward type player. So he's obviously a possibility as well. But I'm just kind of curious to see who's going to be that other playmaker. Maybe it will be Cam Thomas. You know, that would be the next step in his development, letting him become more of a true playmaker. But that is something else that I'm a little concerned about with this Nets team. But then the last thing I want to talk about from what I noticed from these preseason games is just the play of Zaire Williams. I mean, he has been very impressive in the preseason. And I remember when the Nets traded for him and like the whatever side deal they did to get him. Because I think they traded for him. Or did they sign him? I always thought they traded. I honestly don't remember. But when they acquired him, and whatever way they did, I remember saying, I like this. This guy has potential. He was the 10th overall pick in the draft 3 years ago. Like he's not some washed up player. He's 23 years old with still loads of upside. And we're seeing that upside or that potential. He is a very gifted athlete. And I think I'm just getting a little excited right now, but if you played Zaire Williams at the 3, Noah Clowney at the 4, and Nick Claxton at the 5, and Ben Simmons as the point guard, it doesn't matter who else is out there as the 2. That is an unbelievably tough and impressive defensive team. Like, I don't know. Like that to me is what I'm thinking about with this Nets team is those 4 players in particular would be unbelievable defensive players, and Zaire Williams just fits the mold of what the Nets need. He's a Swiss Army knife player, can do a little bit of everything, and we've seen him do that. And he almost carried the Nets in the comeback win against the Raptors in the last game. He was making big shots. He was making defensive plays. He was diving on the ground, and he should definitely be in the rotation to start this season. And I'm excited for him. So great job, Sean Marks, eyeing a player with potential and giving him a second chance. So I'm excited about it. But overall, I was pretty pleased with what I saw from the preseason from the Nets, despite them being 1-4. 1-3. I just think that the development is going to be key. But I really like the way they play. I really think they're going to be a tough team for a lot of teams out there. I think they're going to be just a fun team to watch, and for that, I'm excited about. Okay, so let's wrap up this episode by doing what I normally always do. Well, hold on a second. Before I do that, I usually have some kind of stupid, bold prediction. I think my bold prediction is going to be not a good one in the terms of what the goal is for this Nets team, which remember is to suck. My bold prediction is that the Nets are going to win at least 25 games this year. That's my bold prediction. And why I say that's not good is, like I said, the objective is to be one of the worst teams in basketball. So you have the high draft pick, but I have a feeling that somehow this Nets team is going to screw up at sucking, and they're going to win at least 20 games, but I'm going to say about 25 games. So 20 to 25 is what I'm thinking. That's my bold prediction. I'm going to stick with the 25 mark because that was my initial reaction. 25-57 is what I see this Nets team doing, which is only 7 games less than less wins that they did last year. But I really do believe that the way this roster is, they're more than capable of that. And now, granted, like we discussed in this episode, that can definitely change with certain players being traded or injuries. But even so, I've been impressed with the toughness I've seen from this Nets team and the attitude and the possible development. And I'm also curious to see what's going to happen with Nick Claxton. There's some speculation that he's really going to become a focal point of this team. And I'm curious to see if the Nets are going to finally unleash the Claxton, as I've been saying for the longest time. I don't want to make a prediction about that because I honestly don't know. But I would like to see the Nets kind of unleash him and give him 10 to 15 touches a game, in the post or catching the ball at the top of the key and letting him show his offensive diversity and his skill set, not just being a rim protector, rim runner, lob threat. But that's my bold prediction. Nets are going to win 25 games. And if they do win 25 games, they still could finish in the bottom 5 record-wise, so that's okay, I guess. So I guess that would be like the best case scenario in my mind. The Nets win 25 games. They finish with like the fifth worst record. Then during the lottery, they get a top 3 pick because I feel like if you get top 3 in this upcoming draft, it's going to be a franchise changing player because there's a lot of good players in this draft. So maybe that's the best case, but that's my bold prediction. Nets are going to win 25 games and shock some people. So, all right. So now I'll end this episode the way I always end most NetsBoy episodes, and that is looking at the first few games of the season and what I think could happen. So the Nets start off, obviously, this home game against, not a home game, on the road against the Hawks, which, once again, depending on when you're seeing this episode, you might have already seen it and want to look back and see how right was NetsBoy. I think that's a game the Nets could actually win, just because of the fact that I can see the Nets, being more prepared than the Hawks. I think it's more of a coaching thing. And I think, the first game of the year and the season, anything can happen. And even though the Hawks are a better team than the Nets, I think the Nets could steal that one. So I actually think the Nets could win that game. And I actually think the same thing against the Magic. Magic are a much better team as well, but early on in the year is when you can get these teams, these better teams, before they kind of have things figured out. So they could win that game too, even though they're both on the road. Definitely going to lose to the Bucks. Definitely going to lose to the Nuggets. Probably going to lose to the Grizzlies before they have the first game against a team that I actually think the Nets can beat, and that's the Bulls. And when I say the Nets can't beat or should beat, the Bulls are a team that could actually shock a lot of people too, depending on the health of Zach and the play of Zach LaVine and Vucevic. So they could lose that game as well, but I think they should win that game. So the first 5 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games actually, that's what I was looking at. The first 6 games of the season, I do think the Nets could go 2-4. I really do. I wouldn't expect them to be better than 2-4, but I think, they could win at least 2 of those games. I'm not going to do this whole thing that if they do worse than that, I'm going to be disappointed, because I'm not. Because if the Nets go 0-6, it means they're on pace for a bottom 5 record, which means great draft picks. So this is a rare year where I ain't going to be that upset when the Nets don't do what I think is going to happen. But I do think a 2-4 start, they're capable of it. I think they're going to shock some of these teams, especially early on in the year. So that's what I'm thinking. So there you have it. Thank you so much for dealing with me on this episode. Let me know what you guys think about everything, about every point I made, who you think is going to be on this team by the end of the year, who's going to be traded, who could be waived. The play of Claxton, is he going to really be the focal point? Cam Thomas's development, Cam Johnson, what we think if from Zaire Williams, if he's going to really be a key player like he's looked so far. Anything or everything. Let me know what you guys think about this Nets team, about Jordi Fernandez. If you like what you've seen from him so far as a coach, let me know. Comment and share these episodes and videos. And keep your eyes open to the next NetsBoy episode. We'll see exactly when it'll be. The Nets schedule is pretty much an every other day thing. So it's going to be interesting when I'm going to film an episode, but I'll do it when I have some time. So might be a while, but I feel like I addressed enough to at least start things off for this new season. So until the next NetsBoy episode, this is NetsBoy, excited for the season. Oh, and also saying, let's go Yankees, woo! And signing off.